Hello and welcome to Battle Tested History number 15. And yes, today we're doing old blood and guts himself, George S. Patton.
Yes. One of the
Talk to me,
greatest
Scott.
U.S. generals ever.
Take it away, buddy.
Um, what can you say about George Patton? I mean, most people love him, few people hate him. I think almost every one of us has seen the movie, which is one of the very few movies that is more than historically accurate. There's only a few dramatized scenes. And here was a guy who, he joined the army. He was cavalry. Nobody knew about him. And boom, 1942, we got our asses handed to us at Kasserine Pass. And the army was falling apart at the seams. It looked like the Germans were going to push us out of North Africa. And they send Patton in. And if anybody's seen the movie, let me move over a little so I don't have to lean. If anybody has seen the movie, Patton came in. He was tough as nails. He got those troops in order, and eventually they just kicked ass, and along with the British who were coming from the other way, but they eventually drove the Africa Corps out of North Africa.
Yep.
The Sicilian campaign, that was another brilliant maneuver. He was like so far outpacing what they expected. It was like, don't take that. There was like a scene in the movie. I don't remember the town, but it was true. They told you not to take this town. Oh, after they want me to give it back.
I think it was Palermo.
Palermo?
I think it was Palermo, yeah.
You
Want me to give it back?
And, what I find amazing is that they sidetracked him for the Normandy invasion, because the movie makes it seem like it was a punishment for slapping that soldier. In reality, they knew that the Germans expected him to lead the Normandy invasion. So they put him farther north across from the
Pas de Calais.
Yeah, Pas de Calais, the smallest part. And they had this whole thing set up, this elaborate charade that he was going to be leading the army division, and he was coming across, and they did this. They did an end run and landed at Normandy. And 2 months later, they brought Patton over. They took him down to, I can't remember, Argentan, or I think that's an Argentan. And they told him to go. And after that,
he went.
He pretty much went until he ran out of gasoline.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And old George. Yeah, the thing I like best about the movie, well, there's two things I like best. One was it showed how once he was finally given his head, he just went for it. There was no stopping him. The other part I like about the movie, and this is going to come up often over the next hour, is the competition between him and Monty.
Yeah.
If you watch, I've noticed a bizarre thing with documentaries, because I watch a lot of documentaries. And when it comes to the Second World War, particularly the war in Europe, the documentaries seem to be produced by the Brits, who all, it's not that they have a bias towards Montgomery. It's that they kind of skirt the issue of what an incompetent, fumbling bastard he was. That's my opinion, but
Montgomery's my opinion, I'm not a big Montgomery expert. My opinion on Monty is that you had three generals who screwed it all up in North Africa.
Yep.
Wavell, a couple of others, and they brought in Montgomery. Yes, he was successful at El Alamein, and I'm going to get into this. Yes, Facebook user he was. I'm going to get into a minute the difference between Montgomery and Patton when it comes to intelligence. But he was also a prima donna. And that rang with the British citizens at the time. You know, wearing the leather jacket in the middle of the desert and the hats and that. It was a popular figure. And the British at that time did not have, I mean, the British were losing everywhere. You know, Asia, the Japanese rolled up the entire British Empire in 6 months.
Oh yeah, it was
It,
like they weren't even there.
it was devastating. Two of their biggest battleships, the Prince of Wales and I can't think of the other one, was sunk in an afternoon. It completely devastated them. But he did the right thing at El Alamein. He faked that they were going to go through. He faked that they were going to attack directly down the road, and instead they did the end run through Qatar Depression, cut him off, and that was it. Rommel never stopped until he got to Italy.
Yeah, and well, the thing is, Monty built up such an incredible superiority of men, arms, and equipment.
Hmm.
He had by far the material advantage,
Yeah.
and he still almost lost. El Alamein was touch and go,
Yeah.
and it wasn't the great victory
No.
they made it out to be.
No. But with what was going on with the Americans on the other side of North Africa, Rommel had to retreat. I will give Monty credit. He allowed the intelligence people, because what they did was they sent. There was this radio operator that was dealing with the secured messages, and they knew this. And for some strange, bizarre reason, the radio where you got the top secret messages was in a building completely separate from headquarters. So when the messages were printed, he'd go over, drive them over. This showgirl, who was extraordinarily gorgeous, came on to him. And apparently this guy was like overweight, dumpy, not very intelligent. So he would make these pit stops at her house on the way to deliver the messages. And while she was doing her deed for the fatherland, the intelligence was in the other room copying it all. He was caught, and he was told, he was told, tell you what, we'll give you the opportunity. No one ever knew his name, because they said, if you do this, you'll be a hero. If you don't do this, we're going to try you in public court. We'll humiliate you, humiliate your family. Your name will be trash in history. So he agreed to take a Jeep with false intelligence saying that the British were going to attack head on at El Alamein. And he drove it into a German minefield and killed himself. The Germans got it, and the documents said they were going to go right through El Alamein. That's where Rommel put all his forces. Monty then did the end run, similar to what we did in the first Desert Storm, and cut him off. But after that, this is the one thing that amazed me. This info wasn't available for the movie because it didn't come out till later. We knew through Enigma where all the German forces were in Europe.
Right.
We knew exactly where the armored divisions were, where the heavy German troop concentrations. Monty went old school. Monty would say, okay, if there's 10,000 German soldiers in this city, I will build up a force of 30,000 and we'll go, we'll take them on. Patton was just brilliant. It's like, okay, there's a large division here,
Yep.
there's a large division here, and he'd go between them. And the next thing the Germans knew, they're behind enemy lines, and Patton and his armor division is just heading for the rear.
Yep.
They had to break down, they had to get out of the area as quick as possible. There's a great line in Market Garden, The Bridge Too Far, where Rundstedt says, we are losing the war faster than the Americans can win it.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what made him, and somebody brought up a point once. Most people who served in World War II will say, I was with the 1st Marine Division, I was with the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne. Only those that were with the 3rd Army said, I was with Patton.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you were talking about, Monty's proclivity for building up. The best example of this was the crossing of the Rhine.
Yeah.
Because Monty one thing you got to give the guy props for. He was great at the set piece battle.
Mm-hmm.
Get all your stuff ready, massive bombardment, the whole 9 yards. So he built up his forces, and built up his forces, and built up his forces to do the Rhine crossing. Meanwhile, First Army found a bridge across the Rhine at Remagen. Then Patton, not wanting to be outdone, built himself a pontoon bridge, and he crossed the Rhine. Then Monty finally did his crossing after much fanfare, and that was the difference.
Yeah. And a Facebook user that says Eisenhower given into Monty. Yes, Operation Market Garden set us back. And again, there was that whole thing about the intelligence failures. They knew the 9th and 10th SS Panzer divisions were there, and they still went with it. The one thing about Eisenhower was, when I was younger, I thought he was a horrible general. He is a horrible general. He wasn't the general there. He was a politician. He was trying to keep the British and the Americans, keep that alliance going. Because, it was embarrassing for the British. We kept them alive with Lend-Lease. Our general was much better than their general. Patton was running circles around. When they had proposed Market Garden, it was almost as if Eisenhower knew if he didn't, it would cause a gigantic rift. So he went with it. He was being political, and it didn't work. So I think if he'd given the forces and the gas to Patton, it probably would have ended sooner.
Well, Eisenhower had a job to do. It's a job I don't think anybody else could have done.
No.
His job was to keep the big picture, to keep that coalition together, which was nobody in history had ever done that before.
No.
He did. So all props to the guy.
Yeah.
Politician, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
he was great at that.
Mm-hmm.
And you even see it. I know this is kind of off topic, but you even see it in his presidency. He didn't really do anything that was so bold that it caused a lot of controversy. That's one of the reasons. There's not a lot you can say about the Eisenhower administration. It's because he really didn't do a lot. He built the interstate road system and that, but you can't think of any major controversies like you do with Johnson, Kennedy, Carter, Reagan, the others. And the great thing was, every time things hit the fan, it was Patton that pulled it out
Yep.
because the Battle of the Bulge. Monty's like, it'll take us a week or two to shift forward. Patton said he'd do it in 72 hours. He did it he shifted his entire army, and they broke through the day after Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's still a tank. There's a Panther tank at the location. Oh, hi, Ed or Lee. There's still a Panther tank at the site in right outside of Bastogne where the two U.S. forces hooked up.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, we should point out that the 101st Airborne never said they needed to be relieved. Never said they needed to be rescued.
No.
You got to give props to both.
Yeah.
The 101st did an incredible, impossible job.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The 101st, the story of the 101st, the Band of Brothers, is fascinating. And what I find fascinating, my wife's grandfather was with the 101st. He parachuted into Normandy. I think he was at Market Garden. He was at Bastogne, and she has a picture of him at Berchtesgaden after the war.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, they were great. The 101st, the 82nd,
Yep.
the Third Army just were fantastic.
Oh yeah. There's no denying that what Third Army did, and pulling out of the battle, driving 100 miles, and going straight into another one in the middle of winter. In fact, in the middle of one of the worst winters on record.
Yeah.
Was an astounding feat.
Yeah. And the fact, which is just pure coincidence, but he ordered the chaplain to pray for good weather, and good weather appeared.
Yeah.
I love the movie, but my favorite scene in the movie is one of the very few scenes that was highly dramatized.
Yep.
And that's when they were entering Messina.
Yeah.
And Monty's coming in with the big parade, and there's the bands playing and everything. And then when they turn the corner, the band stops, and Monty gets out of his Jeep and walks up, and there is Patton's Third Army waiting in the town square with Patton in his dress uniform standing on the steps.
Yep.
You shan't laugh, George. I'm not going to kiss you. Pity. I shaved close this morning in preparation of being smacked by you.
Yep.
The truth is, there were two Jeeps, one British, one American, they were both sent out ahead of the army because the Germans had evacuated. And the American Jeep reached the Messina town hall 10 minutes before the British did.
Yeah.
So that's the reality, but it still makes good movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can give them a little bit of drama. It was just one. Yeah, Patton's one of my favorite war movies, I think.
Oh, it is.
There's so many good ones.
There's a few things that I don't think they explain as well. Which was actually two incidents. The soldier slapping incident.
Right.
He was not. Yes, he was mad at the soldier for being a coward, but he was thinking of all of the troops that were out there getting killed, which it just hurt him that these boys were dying, which was one of the reasons why he did what he did. End the war quickly, do as few battles as possible, send these boys home alive. But, that was the main reason for it. I mean, he wasn't just being an ass. He was like, right. How dare, these heroes die and you get to sit back here and cry.
Yeah, which was utterly insensitive of him. But generals in wartime are not supposed to be kinder and gentler. They're not. They're supposed to go out there and kill people.
Yeah. Or, as Patton said, The object is not to die for your country. The object is make the other poor dumb bastard die for his country.
Damn straight.
Yeah.
Well, um, you can draw a lot of parallels between the Second World War and the Civil War. Um, Civil War, you had McClellan,
Mm.
who was incredible at organization. He really, after um, Bull Run, Manassas, whichever name you want to go by, after that loss, he brought the army together and actually turned it into an army. Unfortunately, McClellan didn't know how to use it
Mm.
and just wouldn't use it. And the generals that Lincoln put in place after McClellan,
Yeah.
they didn't get it either
No.
until he found Grant.
Yes.
Grant knew that you had to kill the enemy. You had to destroy their army.
Mm.
There's a great bit in Ken Burns' Civil War documentary.
I love that one.
Incredible. Where it points out that the first time after a battle, I think it was it the second wilderness? Second battle of the wilderness, maybe. When ordinarily the Union Army, prior to Grant, would have retreated, Grant turned south. And the men were like, yes, it's about damn time. Patton was the same way. It was go, 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 drive. Because if you're going to sit and gather your strength, the whole time you're losing people by attrition.
Yeah.
Because far more people die in war from disease
Yeah.
or from, in the case of the Second World War, it was like trench foot
Yeah.
and hypothermia
And friendly fire.
and friendly fire. Yeah. So the sooner you can get the war finished,
Well, that
better
was
off you are.
that was one thing that always, and I know we're not going to stay on the Civil War. The one thing that always got me about Lee was why didn't he push forward after Manassas? I lived outside of Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
It was an hour car ride from Manassas to Washington. If he'd pushed forward, everybody was in retreat. There were so many civilians who would come down to watch this that were clogging the roads. The war would have been over and it would have been a Southern victory in a couple of days. But inactivity, like Monty does.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say one thing about Patton that I find very impressive that's not in the movie. I had years ago, back in 2003, me and two very good friends of mine, Eric and Renee, we did a tour of Europe, Normandy to the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw everything related to the Battle of the Bulge. We were at Malmedy, we were at Bastogne, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Belgium to see Patton's grave. And Patton's grave is right up front of the cemetery. The cemetery is built like the other cemeteries, perfect aligned rows of, white marble.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy who was on duty told us Patton refused that. When Patton died, he demanded that he be put in the next spot in the line of cemeteries, in the row of crosses. So he was in with the general, the privates, the sergeants, the corporals.
Yep.
It was because so many people went to see Patton's grave that they were chewing up everything around it. So, against his wishes, the caretakers of the cemetery dug him up and moved him to the very front row, so people could come in, say hello to Patton, and not ruin the rest of the cemetery. That's how much he loved his troops. He didn't want a
Yep.
grand. He just wanted to be buried with the guys he loved. So,
Yes. Story about the letter he wrote. What it would take to win the war. Yeah. Yeah. What the the Lincoln's problem was he needed to find a general who could understand the math.
mm,
The Union Army could have won that war years before it did, for the very simple reason that they had the men, they had the equipment, and they had the industry.
yes.
The South literally could not compete, but it took all the way until Grant till Lincoln found a general who understood that math.
Mm,
Patton understood that math. He understood it completely.
yeah. And I mean, war is not fun.
No.
And, and the more the more destruction you do to the enemy. Look at Sherman.
Yes.
I mean, he devastated the South.
Yes.
But
On purpose.
if the South had won the war, he would have been tried as a war criminal.
Yep.
But the North won, he's a hero.
But the philosophy he put in play for his march to the sea was correct.
Mm-hmm.
Take away their will to fight. Take away the infrastructure that supports the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. Yes, we destroyed Germany.
Oh yeah.
Germany was utterly wrecked. But that was the only way to do it.
And even then, and we're still on Patton, but let me get off track a little bit. Most movies don't. Most movies make you think that after the Battle of the Bulge, Germany fell apart. It didn't. I mean, the German army stayed together. It was another 5 months before Germany surrendered. And I mean, yes, they were getting their asses kicked on the Eastern Front. They were so desperate. I mean,
Yes.
near the last month of the war, they moved all their forces eastward, hoping that the Americans would sneak in. And one thing that's not much mentioned about Patton is the Hammelburg raid of March 1945. And they had crossed the Rhine River. The German forces weren't that strong. So he decided he had a son in law, John Waters, who was captured in Tunisia in 1943 and was being held in a Luftstalag. So he put together this task force Baum, which was about 300 or so people with some tanks in that. The
Right.
idea was to do a 50-mile raid to the Luftstalag, break it open, get out the prisoners, get out John Waters, and get back. And it became an absolute nightmare because the few German forces that were around there just kicked task force Baum's ass. Most of them, a lot were killed, most were captured. Of the
Right.
300 people in Task Force Baum, only 32 made it back to their life. Wait a second. Come on, girl. My cat. She's demanding attention.
Uh-huh.
And the movie Fury points that out too. Now, granted,
Mhm.
Fury is not historically accurate,
Right.
but it does, I think, do a very accurate job on tank warfare.
Yep.
And that movie points out that, German towns didn't always surrender. I mean, German soldiers, German locals
Right.
fought tooth and nail to prevent us from, getting to Berlin.
Yes, they did. Well, the biggest problem with the Hammelburg raid among many, was they went down there expecting there to only be about 300 prisoners. There
Mm.
were 5,000 there.
Yeah.
And then my favorite part of it was that the object of the raid, Patton's son in law, ended up getting shot in the ass,
Yeah.
which is funny. It's a funny wound, but in this case, it was also a bad wound.
Yeah.
So they couldn't pull him out of there. They had to leave him because they had a hospital.
Mm.
Because, yeah, so he needed medical attention. So
Yeah.
the whole thing was botched, and then, like 2 weeks later, the full Third Army
Yeah.
made it there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
It
his
was,
worst decision of the war, in
it
my
was,
opinion.
it was.
But it did, I think it did tell a lot of people who are paying attention that, yeah, the Germans aren't just rolling over. They're not just falling apart.
No.
You know, at the end of the movie, The Battle of the Bulge, you have that great scene where all of the, which just like it drives me insane. They're all walking across a desert, the white sands of New Mexico, because the white sands is supposed to be snow. No. If you ever been to the Bulge, there's no open ground. But they have all the Germans walking away in defeat. And it's like, yeah, they retreated, but they retreated to the Siegfried line. And they put up
Yep.
an incredibly difficult fight. Hurtgen Forest.
Yeah. Well, there's another um, uh, Monty misstep.
Yeah.
The Hopefully's Gap.
Mm.
Monty was responsible for closing the northern end of the gap that the German army was getting out of the bulge through.
Yeah.
Patton had the southern end. He was there. He was ready to go. But Eisenhower held him back, rightly so, because of the threat of friendly fire with the northern
Yeah.
side. So Monty had to get his troops in position. Well, he took his sweet ass time doing it. So it was it was like 2 weeks
Yeah.
when that thing was open, and the German army is pouring through it.
Well,
So
it was similar to the Falaise Gap in Normandy.
yes, yes,
You
exactly.
know, Patton's forces were coming around from the south, and Monty was just plugging along. And so many Germans got away
Yep.
through the Falaise Gap. If they had closed that off, war might have been over a lot earlier.
Yeah. Well, you look at a fist fight. I mean, I'm sure you've had them.
Yeah.
In your youth. Hell, that's what we used to do for fun. But when you're in a fist fight with somebody and you hit them and they're dazed, you have to stop.
Yeah.
You hit them again. Monty would stop, gather his troops together, neaten up his lines, and then he'd go forward again. And every time he did it, more Germans would escape.
Yeah. I think I thought the end of the movie was brilliant when Patton gets fired and has to leave in disgrace, and he's walking his dog, and Monty gets seen by the Queen and gets a
Yes.
knighthood for all the stuff he did.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it would be interesting to note how much longer would the war have lasted if, and I'm not being mean to him, he's a great general, if Omar Bradley had been the American general leading the Third Army rather than Patton.
Um, well, Bradley, you don't want to discount Bradley.
No, Bradley's great.
He he wasn't as flamboyant by any
Right.
stretch.
Oh God, no.
Not by any stretch. He wasn't, certainly wasn't the prima donna that Patton was.
No.
But he was a damn good general.
Yes, but
And he knew how to fight.
the only difference was Patton was much more gung ho, I think.
Yes.
Bradley was a little bit more towards the Monty side, the traditional fighting. But
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm not saying that. I mean, Omar Bradley is one of the greatest generals the Americans had during World War II. But it's a fascinating period of history. The entire from Normandy to the fall of Berlin,
Yep.
and then I know that Eisenhower came into got a lot of complaints for not taking Berlin.
Which, no, that was the right call.
It was
That
the
was
right call
absolutely the right call.
because no one knew Hitler was in Berlin. Everyone assumed the city was about to fall. Everyone assumed that Hitler and most of the forces and the werewolves had all gone to Bavaria. They'd gone to the mountains, that they were
Right.
building up fortresses there. So taking Berlin would have been symbolism.
Yeah.
Eisenhower actually did the strategically smart thing. He sent his forces to crush what was left of the army.
Right.
Turned out there wasn't that much left of the army.
No.
And then the Soviets went in and they got the political prize.
Yeah, but also when the Soviets lost like 300,000
Oh yeah.
casualties
Yeah.
taking Berlin.
Yeah.
Part of that was Stalin didn't give a rat's ass
Oh no.
about his soldiers.
No.
He couldn't care less about them.
Yeah.
He threw them in. No weapons, go.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
pick up the weapons from the guy in front of you, Dud.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's
all
true.
those German U-boats.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember too. At one point, it was Zhukov and Choikov were both coming in, and Zhukov was originally told, "You take downtown Berlin," and Stalin said, "I don't care. I'll make a hero out of the first one of you that gets to, the Reichstag."
Right.
And he was pitting his own generals against each other.
Right. Right. And, if you think about it, if Berlin was such an important target, all they would have had to do, and they damn near ended up doing it anyway, was bomb it flat. Bomb that thing flat, city's gone.
Oh, most of it was destroyed, though.
Most of it was destroyed anyway.
Yeah.
But a little bit more bombing, Berlin would have ceased to be.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have shortened the war by a second.
Yeah.
Eisenhower needed to destroy the German army.
He did.
Now, Hitler, being insane, helped in that regard by putting up such a fierce defense of Berlin. Berlin was a lost cause.
It was.
Completely.
Yeah.
Once the Russians crossed the Elbe.
And there was no strategic value to it.
None.
It's not like it was a rail hub. There were factories there. I mean, every place that was vital to the war effort had already fallen to the Americans, the Brits, or the Soviets.
Or been bombed into oblivion.
Yeah. No, he just went. But I mean, he was under that delusion that he was Frederick the Great.
Yeah.
And that just like the Frederick the Great, the war he was involved in, the British and the Russians would have a falling out, and they would fight each other, and Germany would come through. And I mean, look how excited they got when FDR died. Goebbels was like, "Oh, this is it. This proves the Fuhrer is right."
Well, yeah, but he didn't know Harry Truman.
No.
You can't discount the fact that Truman, who, when FDR died, I think Truman said he felt like a building just fell on his head, something
Yeah,
like that.
barely. He felt like a bale of hay just fell on his head. Yeah.
Something, yeah.
And yet the worst part about it was he had no clue what was going on. They brought
None.
him in as political show
Yep.
to start to get some of the states in the Midwest, like Missouri.
Right.
They never told him about the Manhattan Project. They
No.
never told him what was going on with the Soviets and the British. You
Yep.
know, he was
And
just like,
then
all of a sudden one day the general comes in and goes, "Let me tell you about this device we're making."
and Truman, to his credit, amidst all of that chaos
Mm.
and all of that confusion and all of the ludicrous amount of pressure that he was under, that you or I or nobody could imagine
Yeah,
how much pressure that was.
Mm.
But he went nuke 'em.
yeah, the Japanese,
Do
not
it.
the German.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah. No, I mean it's. I used to have a professor, Martin Sherwin, and he taught a course on nuclear weapon history, and we argued this for a week. He swears that Truman did it to show the Soviets we had it and we would use it. I still disagree. I say his number one reason for dropping it was to end the war and save American and British and Canadian and even Japanese lives. It was only after he saw the devastation of the first two bombs that he was willing to make the concession of letting the emperor stay in power.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that and the fact that after we dropped the second bomb, we were out of bombs.
Yeah, we only had like one or two left. Yeah, that did help.
Yeah, we didn't have enough uranium um, purified or whatever it was.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough U-235.
Yeah. And we still had to make the plutonium for the fat boy, but
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I think Truman's main concern was the number of men it would have taken to invade the Japanese home island.
there was a study done at the time.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the operation, the way it was planned. I think it was scheduled for March 45. And they estimated that 1 million American Allied troops and Japanese would die in the battle. That's not even counting the casualties. They put
Right.
the estimate as 1 million dead, and I can't remember what their estimated toll was for kamikaze losses, but it was astounding.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's true.
And what the very few people talk about, even if they took out all of Japan, Japan still had the largest army. The largest part of its army was in China.
Yeah.
So if they decided to fight on,
Oh, yeah, they could have.
yeah,
They could have. Well, I remember growing up, them finding occasionally, lone Japanese soldiers
yeah,
who were still holding out
yeah,
because they hadn't heard the war was over.
Mm.
And it's just like the 70s.
yeah,
Yeah. 30 years is an awful
yeah,
long time to go without hearing anything.
yeah. And then finding out the emperor was like on the Tonight Show. But I mean, we should do a show sometime on whether the emperor of Japan was really that sort of pushed aside figure, that everybody claimed after the war, or if he was the one who really started it and the Allies gave him a break to end the war early.
Well, Hirohito was pretty young. Or not, no, not Hirohito, but yeah, the emperor was a kid, basically.
Mm.
He was in his late 20s.
Yeah. But
So,
we can do a show on this. I still go with the fact he did everything. He's the one that gave the orders. He's the one that went through the whole thing. And then Patton told Truman, look, you've got to let the emperor stay. If you get rid of the emperor, you're going to have to keep 1 million U.S. troops in Japan.
You mean MacArthur?
MacArthur. You have to keep 1 million U.S. troops in Japan for about 100 years.
Yeah.
And it was a small price to pay. I mean, it's not like after World War II, the emperor did anything. He was like the Queen of England. He was worshipped. The people loved him, but he just was a tie to the past.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like the family cat. That's kind of what he was to Japan.
Yeah. God, I remember he was the only emperor I ever knew until he died. I was born in 63 and he was still emperor, and I think he died late 80s, early 90s.
Something like that.
Yeah. But getting back to Patton.
Patton.
Yes.
Yeah, he oh George. The whole blood and guts moniker. Yeah, he was a butcher. Yeah. No question about it. But let me see who. There was a comment. Yeah, the answer to that was Lee who said that. That was Robert E. Lee who said that. But it's true.
Yeah.
It's a good thing war is hell, or we would grow to love it. That's very true.
Well, I remember Patton's words. The only way for a soldier to die is in the last bullet of the last battle of the last war.
Yep. I know. What an ignominious way for him to go.
I know.
He got a fender bender.
Yeah, a car accident that paralyzed him, and then he died.
It just ain't right.
Of course, then you could go through the 1,001 conspiracy theories about that.
Horse shit. Conspiracy theories.
They made a movie about one of those conspiracy theories. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I know. And there's a few documentaries about it.
Yeah.
It's nonsense.
Yeah. The Soviets took him out because he was rebuilding the German army and
nonsense.
But they did even talk about that in the movie. When he said to, oh God, I can't think of who Eisenhower's guy was.
Beale Smith?
Beale Smith. When he said, you don't even have to know about it. Just say yes and I'll start a war and we'll take out those damn commies.
And we'll make it think that they started it.
Yeah.
And he was right.
Yeah.
He was right. But war is something you can't do without the will of the people.
No.
Vietnam is a perfect example.
Yeah.
The will of the people was not there.
No.
You couldn't sustain that war.
One of the saddest things I always thought about the Vietnam War was, for all of his faults, Johnson refused to run for the presidency in 1968. And he had his people saying to the Vietnamese via back channels, let's end this. Let's cut the... And the Vietnamese said no, because they were convinced no one would ever vote for Nixon. They are convinced they were going to get
McGovern.
And McGovern was, I think it was.
Or Humphrey.
Maybe.
I think it was Humphrey. It's Humphrey.
But whoever.
In 1968, yeah.
Whoever was running was so liberal and was so against the war, the Vietnamese thought, we just sit tight, get the new guy in. We'll get everything we wanted. Yeah, well, they got 3 more years of war.
Yeah, they got carpet bombed.
Yeah.
What was it, Rolling Thunder?
Yeah, and again, Nixon came in and Nixon wanted to end the war, but Nixon had to up the war to show that he was tough and that he was fighting the Vietnamese. That way, after he blew them apart, then he could offer a peace agreement.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's sad. I've never been in war. Um, I've known a lot of people who have seen combat, and most of them won't even talk about it.
Yeah, the ones, yeah, from my experience, the people who talk about their PTSD
Hmm.
don't have it.
Oh, I knew one guy. My father knew him in where we worked in Lynn, Mass. This guy was a Marine on Guadalcanal. He loved telling his war stories, but he was a little weird in the head. He used to tell stories about how, like, he'd use his bayonet and cut out gold teeth from the Japanese. I mean, he was over the top. But my uncle fought at the Battle of Okinawa. He was at Sugarloaf Hill. 18 people, 18 Marines walked away. Never talked about it. Never said a word. The only thing I knew was that he was with this particular Marine unit. When I was stationed in Okinawa, I did the research and I followed the battlefields, took photographs, and sent them to my uncle. And my father said that was the only time he ever opened up.
Yeah. Yeah, I know my grandfather was in the First World War. He was an ambulance driver.
Ah,
He never said a word about it.
no.
I didn't know till after he died and I saw the pictures he took
Mm,
of the trenches.
yeah,
It was wow.
yeah.
Um, you think the guys who were in Nam didn't talk about it when they got home?
No,
They didn't say nothing about it.
no. It fucks you up.
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
it screws you up. It screws you up. It does a lot of even like Chamberlain, um, the college professor from Maine, who wound up
yeah.
becoming who became the hero at Gettysburg.
Joshua
Um,
Lawrence Chamberlain.
right after the war, his wife said, "I never got my husband back. He had a mistress. It was the military." So,
Yeah. Well, I served 14 years, um, and I never got shot at.
hmm.
And you know what? I'm glad I never got shot at. You know, absolute respect for the guys who went and fought.
Mhm.
Absolute respect.
Yes.
But I'm not gonna deny the fact I'm glad I didn't get shot at.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I did enough crazy shit that could have gotten me killed, but it wasn't because somebody was trying to blow my head off.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with that.
Well, you were there bailing out the Navy when they got in trouble.
Well, the Coast Guard, uh, you look at Apocalypse Now,
Yeah.
who do you think ran those boats?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's the
So,
sad. That's the sad thing. The Coast Guard saves the lives of dumbasses who get themselves in stupid situations because they don't have the brains. You know.
the 9 guys I knew who died on rescue missions,
Oh.
all of them died saving people who had no business doing what they were doing. Every last one of them.
Yeah. They go into.
So,
They do a good job of portraying um, the Coast Guard in Perfect Storm.
yeah, but I refuse to watch that because
Right.
it glorifies morons.
Yeah.
Those guys had no business
No.
being out in that weather. None. And people had to risk their lives because of it.
Yeah.
Should have never happened. Um, the movie I saw that came close was Guardians, Kevin Costner. The only thing
I haven't seen that one. I'll have to
he
watch it.
plays he plays a rescue swimmer.
Okay.
it was pretty accurate, except for the stuff in the operation center.
Yeah.
Because I spent 5 years in a couple of different operation centers. We were nowhere near that high tech. I had a regular computer and like 3 phones.
Uh,
And then we had the radio room.
yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. They tend to overemphasize how technological we can be. I've seen movies like of the CIA, operations center, and it looks like something like NASA. Like, yeah, no, it's not.
Well, especially the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Coast Guard's a redheaded bastard stepchild. They
Yeah,
don't get nothing with the budget. I mean,
that's
their annual budget's like $3 billion.
yeah.
What's the annual budget in the Navy?
Well, they've
Like,
got those big ships. Yeah. You're the
yeah,
first responders of the military.
yeah, yeah. But anyway,
So,
um, interestingly enough, up until at least Vietnam, um, by percentage of service, the Coast Guard had a higher casualty rate than any other branch. That's because the Coast Guard was so small.
right. Yeah. But still, it
Yeah.
was, yeah, you guys were, except for war, you were doing the more dangerous stuff.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like I said, I did enough crazy shit.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. But anyway, it's something that is pointed out in the movie Patton. Um, Nothing in human endeavor compares to war.
No.
It doesn't.
No.
Um, it's sad. It's unfortunate. But if you look at history, what is most of history?
War.
War.
Yeah.
Or the result of war.
Yeah. And the more modern war gets, I mean, it used to be, centuries ago, it was two armies fighting it out, and occasionally some civilian village would get in the way. Now we've bombed the hell out of the civilians to get them to cave in first. It's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's, um, I think it was, I think it was in the movie towards the very end, but I know it was in a couple of the books that I read. Patton lamented the fact that war had become a thing of push buttons.
Yeah.
You push a button, you send a missile. That's it.
Yeah.
He says, where's the honor in that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And war now is a science, by and large.
And if you've not experienced it and you move up through the ranks, my opinion, you are more likely to I've never been in it. It can't be that bad. Let's send the kids in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I I have no idea how I would respond in combat. And the thing is, nobody does.
No.
Um, I've known guys that were the big, burly, big men on campus. The macho dudes who would break down and cry like little girls
Yeah.
when the pressure got too much.
Yeah.
You never know.
No. And that's what I loved about the opening scene in Saving Private Ryan. I think he did as well as he could, showing the horror, the disgust, and those kids crying on the beach because they're hiding behind a tank trap and machine gun bullets are ricocheting off them.
Mm-hmm. There's another great movie, When Trumpets Fade, about Hurtgen Forest.
I have not seen that one.
Oh, it's good.
I got to check
There's
that out.
toward the very end. Um, it follows a couple of different characters. One of which is a rookie.
Mhm.
He's barely out of boot camp, and there's a scene as they're in battle, and the kid is just screaming in terror while he's fighting. It's like, to me, that's what I would be doing. I'd be going,
Yeah.
"Ah, ah."
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Don't
you know,
know. I'm
you have no idea.
I'm
You have
lucky I
no
never
idea.
I'm lucky I never served. I served in a few potential, but they were really, the potential for combat wasn't that great. But
Yeah,
I give kudos to anybody who served in
yes,
a frontline unit, whether you saw the
absolutely,
action or not.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I anybody who put on a uniform, and I lump you in with that because you are operational,
Well,
sort of.
yes, but most of I spent 3 years in Seoul when
Mm,
things were rough, right after the death of Kim Il Sung, but we never really expected war to break out.
right.
And I was at CENTCOM when Desert Shield broke out, but we really weren't expecting to get hit Iraqi missiles. And I was in Basra during the first few months of the occupation,
Mm,
where there was always the possibility of Al Qaeda rising up, but
yeah.
never happened.
Well, see, that's the thing. Uh, when you join the military,
Mhm.
when you join an organization like the CIA,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter whether or not you actually get in the shit,
Yeah.
as the expression goes.
Mhm.
You signed on the dotted line.
Yeah.
You raised your hand. You said, I'm willing, if necessary.
Yeah.
I'm really glad it was never necessary for me.
Yes. Yeah. My biggest fear was HR. So
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, even, you know, the, the, the supply and the admin weasels get a lot of shit. And I've given them a lot of shit with some justification. But even the guys who are in the rear with the gear,
yeah.
the people fighting, couldn't do what they have to do without them.
Yeah.
So if you become a cop, if you become a firefighter, um, if you put your life on the line, then you have my absolute respect.
Yeah. Well, there's something that I don't think they've ever made a movie about it. The Red Ball Express in World War II.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
guys that drove those trucks from Normandy to the front line.
yep,
So,
yeah. But anyway, that brings us
yeah.
to the end of our hour.
Yes.
George Patton.
I hope you people enjoy. We love talking about Patton.
Oh yeah, that's the man.
Yep.
That my hats off to him. He There's some really good books out there. One of them, there were two books that the movie was based on. One
Mhm.
was about Patton. The other one was A Soldier's Story
Yeah.
by Omar Bradley.
Wasn't the other one by Ladislav Varago?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the one I read.
yeah. A Soldier's Story
Mhm.
is a great book. I highly recommend it because I mean Bradley was like a regular guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't flashy, and the way he talks about the war is very matter of fact, very straightforward, and it's really fascinating to see. that interplay. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
A Soldier's Story by Omar Bradley.
Mhm.
So anyway, okay, one more comment. Georgie and I made family of glory. There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Facebook user Zuckerberg, whoever you were,
Yeah.
um, and Lee Edwards for joining us. Um,
If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe and like.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we will see you next time. Actually,
3
it will
weeks.
be in 3 weeks.
3 weeks. I won't be
3
here
weeks.
2 weeks from now. I'll be at a convention.
It'll be 3 weeks, which will be the 10th, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
It is, yes, that is the 10th.
Yeah.
That will be the 10th. So we will see you then, folks. And until then,
Ciao.
peace out.